Good afternoon and welcome to Policy Matters. My name is Dustin Goverlow, and with us today we have Judy Estenson. Judy is challenging Doug Goehring, who is the current Agriculture Commissioner for the state of North Dakota, for the Republican nomination for that office. Judy, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and why you are running for Agriculture Commissioner?
Well, a little bit about myself and why I'm running is a lot more than a little bit. But first of all, I want to thank you for saying my name correctly, because I understand that Joel Heitkamp calls me Judy Estenson every time he gets on the radio. So thank you for getting Judy correct. We all know that name recognition is important in a campaign. And on that, what do you need to know about me? I have been married to a farmer and a rancher. His name is Hal. For 35 years, we've raised 5 children. We have livestock and a variety of crops. And I'm also a nurse on the side in that very busy life. I received a Bachelor of Arts degree from college. And I think that what got me in the race is a lot of different things. I just think that we have been watching policy, and we've watched the government become more and more intrusive in our lives, whether it's in medicine or whether it's in agriculture. I think in all aspects of our life we just see more and more regulation. And I think that I'm all about less regulation. I think that in North Dakota we are strong, self-sufficient people who would like to take care of ourselves, and I think we do it the best. And so over several policies that I saw in the last few years, I decided that we needed less regulation and we needed a new ag commissioner. And I had some people who felt the same way, and they got behind me. And now I've got the Liberty PAC behind me, and I just think that's a very short version of why I'm running for North Dakota agriculture. But it's really just all about the future of your children and mine, and making sure that this great state remains a lot of opportunity for the future generations.
Now, you brought up regulation, and as we all know, Republicans like to tout themselves as the party against regulation. Obviously, even the worst Republicans, generally speaking, are not any worse than what some Democrats would like to have. There are exceptions, of course. But, you know, when it comes to a job like the Agriculture Commissioner, doesn't the legislature make most of the regulation and basically rely on the Ag Commissioner to implement that however they see fit?
I think that's absolutely correct description of the Agriculture Commissioner's job. But I've also seen that many, many times the Agriculture Commissioner has influence, great influence, on what legislation comes about in the state of North Dakota. Or he could also prevent some legislation from happening in North Dakota. So I think that we need to make sure that we have somebody in the job that really understands how important it is to really protect animal agriculture and industry in general, if he has the opportunity to stand up for it. I just think that we have to be very cautious about allowing forces to come in that don't have agriculture's best interest at heart. And one of the things that kind of got this ball rolling was actually the Animal Protection Bill 2211. Our commissioner was very favorable for it, and I, on the other hand, felt that it was very dangerous and would have very, very many unintended consequences for the state. And so that is one issue in which we very much took different opposing views on what would be best for North Dakota.
Now, when you say outside influences, what is it that you are alluding to that the Ag Commissioner, Doug Goehring, did that he just shouldn't have done or that you would have done differently?
Well, I hate to talk for him, but from what I hear, his stance was that as North Dakotans, we needed to come to the table with the Humane Society of the United States. They're an outside influence. Their main goal would be to shut down animal agriculture. So I would not call them a friend of ag or North Dakota. And he felt that we needed to come to the table with them and try to update our animal protection bill. We do have one, and we had also had Measure 5, which had been promoted by HSUS, if I'm not incorrect, and it was about increasing animal protection in the state. And we had voted against that measure in the last election. So I feel like North Dakota people had already spoken about how they felt about increasing our laws or legislation regarding animal protection, and yet those people came in and were brought to the table, and there was a bill drafted that was, in my opinion, very dangerous. The bill did end up going through quite a bit of renovation and amendments and had fewer consequences, but still has a felony attached to animal protection. And I just feel that what should have taken place was that we should have stood behind North Dakota's vote and said, no, we don't need to change our animal legislation.
Do you think Commissioner Goehring and pretty much everybody who came out opposing Measure 5 dug themselves a hole that they couldn't get out of when they said to the public, you can vote against this, don't worry, we will pass something next session?
Yes, I do. I think that pretty much describes what somewhat happened. It was a promise that they would come up with something, so then how do you not go to the table and start trying to come up with something when you've made that promise to the public?
Mm-hmm. And what do you think the solution to that would be going forward?
You know, I guess when you're in public service, you need to be really careful what you promise.
Mm-hmm. Do you
so therefore, and I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe you were asking something more. I think that the commissioner's job is to make sure that they don't sit down with every outside influence and say, how can we work something out? I feel like the commissioner's job is really one of guardianship of agriculture in North Dakota, and it's to protect us at all costs and what's best for our interests. It's not to incrementally give up our livelihood and our freedom.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that part of the problem gets to be on the legislature's hands even more so? Because, you know, there's 141 legislators and only one ag commissioner. How much responsibility do you think the legislature and the committees that were involved, being in Republican supermajority control, how much responsibility do they have in letting what you have a disagreement with happen? I
think that you have to have a very workable communicating relationship, and I think any public service job requires a great leader in the fact that you have to be a great listener and a great communicator. And I think that you have to come to the table with all the knowledge that you have and have understood how the possible legislation will affect the public or the ag interests. And I think that you have to do that, and you have to be very, very careful. And then you have to communicate that to the legislatures. I'm not trying to place any blame, but I do believe from some communications that I've had with legislators that were a little bit frustrated with that bill, that there was not enough good communication, and that they felt they didn't have enough good information to begin with. And, you know, sometimes I'm sure in those legislative sessions, they're bombarded with information, and they sometimes are trusting the sources they have. So I think they really have to know that their ag commissioner is very knowledgeable and giving them very good information about what's best for North Dakota.
So what would you do as far as communicating with the legislature when an issue like this came up, where the party as a whole, special interest groups who opposed the Measure 5, everybody was lined up against it saying the same thing, don't worry, we will do something. If you had been there or going forward, you know, looking at this measure or this law, I guess, one, would you seek to have it amended? And two, how would you approach opposing things that are put on the ballot as far as dealing with the public opinion, because as you know, a lot of Republicans in the state basically govern by public opinion, and that started mostly under Governor Hoeven, more so than Governor Schaefer, but that's kind of been the way things have been done since the beginning of this last decade, since the year 2000. How would you do things differently as far as working with legislature in shaping egg policy?
I just think that, it's hard to go back and say, what would you have done differently? I wasn't there. Wasn't there in the start of the process. I think that all I can go back to is that people need to know one thing about me, and that is that I rarely beat around the bush. I'm usually pretty direct. I'm going to go out. I'm going to find the correct answers, and I'm going to be a good communicator. I think anyone that would want to approach me, get my input on something, I'm not going to sit back quietly and not say anything about things that are going to affect North Dakota. I'm going to be right out there. And when it comes to most regulation, I can tell you that you'd have to have something compelling for me to see that regulation is positive. One of the things that I say is it doesn't really matter whether it's an egg or business. Increased regulation always takes money out of the pocket of the producer, and it always makes government grow. And I think I felt the same way very strongly that the Animal Protection Bill would be very harmful in several ways. It would grow those agencies that have to make sure that you're doing it correctly and to monitor it and to throw it into the court. I mean, all those things cost more taxpayer dollars. And so sometimes I think that we're big people in the state. We don't need somebody to tell us how to take care of our puppies and our kitties. So though that bill looked as though it was all about being humane to animals in general, it was going to have some very serious unintended consequences for people who were in the egg business. So we have to understand where it's coming from. We have to understand what its purpose is, and we have to make sure, no law is better than a law that's going to be harmful. So, sometimes I think we say yes because we think we need to satisfy people and protect people, when in fact, those very laws that are set out to do that end up being very harmful. Dustin, I just have probably an ending thought to add as well. I've never thought that leadership was about having a particular position. There's a quote by John Quincy Adams. He says, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. And I think that my actions, I hope, will inspire others to dream more, learn more, and become more, because we have a free North Dakota, because there's still big dreams to dream, because there won't be so much regulation. It gets very cumbersome and very difficult. And, though I know the commissioner, part of his job is regulatory, I think if we minimize that and we look more towards increasing the opportunity for our youth in North Dakota, that things will be a lot better for the future.
Any closing remarks, Andrea?
Just that we're really glad to have Judy Estenson. We're proud to support her. We believe that she has strong principles, and we think she'll make a great candidate this fall.
Just one closing theme. I want people to know that I have joined this candidacy in order to unite the Republican Party, not to divide, and that I'm just hoping that the future Republican Party with Judy Estenson can be victorious in the fall against Ryan Taylor. I believe that I am the candidate that can beat Ryan Taylor, and I want everyone to think long and hard about which candidate will go forth the strongest in the fall.
Well, thank you for joining us. With us today has been Judy Estenson, candidate for North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner. Thanks for joining us. Coming up next, we will be speaking with Doug Goehring himself, North Dakota's Agriculture Commissioner, about this race, about what he sees as the future of agriculture in North Dakota, about his job, his office, his responsibilities, and what he thinks he could do differently as well. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Policy Matters. My name is Dustin Geverlow. I'm your host, and with us today we have North Dakota Agriculture Commissioner Doug Goehring. Good afternoon, Doug. How are you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, Dustin. I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, this weekend we've got the State Republican Convention, and basically it comes down to the only real action in the convention is in your race with a gal from eastern North Dakota named Judy Estenson, who is challenging you for the Republican Convention's nomination for your seat. And we had her on earlier discussing her issues and just getting right into it. What she brings up is the issue of regulation. And basically she's accusing you of wanting to overregulate and promote more regulation. She brings up issues like the animal cruelty bill and the Extraordinary Places bill. The Extraordinary Places discussion in the Industrial Commission. What would your response to the accusation of wanting to overregulate North Dakota's agriculture and industrial environment?
Well, first of all, I don't write the laws. They are either federal laws or they are state laws. We are a regulatory agency that is instructed to implement those laws. Now, how you regulate is another story, and one of the things that we do that's very unique throughout the entire United States is we used a risk-based strategy and education compliance. We do outreach with the regulated community to help them understand what they have to do to comply. Now, that doesn't exist anyplace else in the entire United States, Dustin. First of all, we don't play the gotcha game like EPA and USDA and FDA do. We go in, do outreach, we show them what they need to do instead of just throwing a manual at them like EPA does, and we show them why it's important, these things that are federal laws and these things that are state laws, what needs to take place, how it needs to happen, and then we work with them on 2 or 3 visits to make sure that they get everything in place that they need to do, and then we come back and do inspections and help them to comply. With that being said, we have an 84% compliance rate in the nation. EPA runs in the high 40s. Most of the states, my colleagues, run in the 50s and low 60s. This is a great story to tell. In fact, we have been talking with EPA over the last couple of years about adopting this model and quit playing the gotcha game because it doesn't help anybody. If it really is about helping people comply, then work with them to help them comply. And that's what our approach is here in the department. It works well. The regulated community has come back to us on numerous occasions asking us to actually take over programs, get them away from EPA, because we take a pragmatic, common-sense approach and work with the regulated community to help them come into compliance. Concerning the issue on animal cruelty, that's been a strange one. I've heard comments like, apparently I invited HSUS into the state. Well, first of all, I didn't invite them in. I can't necessarily stop them from coming in. They came in and worked with a group. I'm not even sure what the group was that then pushed a measure a couple years ago, and they lost. But I supported and worked with in the ag community and another coalition. It was made up of Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, North Dakota Stockmen's, the North Dakota Veterinary Medical Association, the Board of Animal Health, Dakota Zoo, a couple of local pet shelters, one out of Bismarck-Mandan, the other one out of Fargo-Moorhead, just to address concerns that they had. They wanted to get out in front of this thing and show that North Dakotans can decide their own future and their own destiny and their own fate. And they knew there were some things they wanted to address, had to address, and they did. I provided them resources. I provided them an attorney. I provided them my state vets, helped find meeting places. So I know that some people had some consternation over that, but you know what? That's what the ag community wanted. That's what this entire coalition wanted. And we supported their efforts, and they actually drafted and developed a bill that went forward to the legislature. The only thing that I played a more direct role in was the first 4 meetings. They had me facilitate those meetings to kind of get everybody on the same page, because I got drug into this 2 years prior to that, so almost 4 years ago, before the legislature met, when there was a group that got together and talked about some of their concerns, and the ag community got rolled over, and that's when I intervened just to have them have a voice. After those first 4 initial meetings, the Stockmans actually took over and chaired the meeting, and they worked with everybody to develop language that they wanted to move forward to the legislature. The legislature actually put together their version, and that's what went before the legislature itself. And during that period of time, because we do oversee and enforce some aspects of animal cruelty in our state, especially for animal agriculture, I was asked to go down and testify and talk about the process and address some of those concerns. The coalition asked me, and there was an expectation from legislators that I would be there. Now, whether people liked that because I showed up, well, this office and this chair is owned by the people of North Dakota, and it was the right thing to do. It isn't owned by one particular group or entity out there. So I did my job as a constitutional office holder, and I'd do it again. I do not appreciate HSUS. I don't want HSUS here. I thought it was very responsible of the coalition for what they did, and that's why I supported them. Concerning the issue on extraordinary places, that is interesting in itself. I've had reporters say, "So you got to tell me what's the issue with this whole private property rights, because whether we agree with you or not, we've been in those industrial commission meetings. We know where you stand. How is this getting twisted to say that you're not for private property rights?" And I've shrugged my shoulders, threw my arms up in the air, because I'm not sure. I was the one that forwarded and proposed the amendment that took private land out of public comment in extraordinary places. I felt it had no bearing, no place to be there, simply based on the fact that if we would do that, we would allow that in that policy that the Industrial Commission was considering, that sets precedent. And all of a sudden, does that mean the public gets to comment whether there's cows grazing out there, whether there's a combine out there, a tractor, a grain bin, a wind turbine? I mean, it's a slippery slope, and it's someplace we didn't need to go. The Industrial Commission did adopt it unanimously to strike that language and make sure that we protect private property owners, that the public will not have comment on private land. The public will have the ability to comment on public land. And in fact, prior to that, they did have the opportunity and the ability to comment on public land. They just had to go to the land managers such as Game and Fish, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, BLM, any of those entities out there, state or federal, that manage land, they would take comments from the public. Now we kind of convoluted and made this a little messy, because we almost give the public equal standing with those federal agencies and those state agencies that are responsible for managing that land by allowing them to get involved in that hearing process, which really complicates things. For example, the Forest Service goes to great lengths, painstakingly lengths, to deal with, for example, operators, oil and gas, pipeline companies, about putting in place some logical, methodical, or method in which they would build roads out there, put in pipelines, where they put tank batteries, where they'd like to see well pads put. And if they go to a permit hearing, and now all of a sudden the public is not happy with what they're proposing in this permit hearing, now you got a whole new element to it, because it could complicate how something's going to be permitted. It could actually slow it down and stop it, even though those land managers like Forest Service have already went to great lengths to make sure they're addressing all the concerns. They want to minimize impact, and they want to mitigate risk also. And that's the first step before it actually comes to the Industrial Commission or to the Department of Mineral Resources to look at the permitting process and then take into consideration all those other things about watersheds, about soils, topography, where there might be a military installation, where there's wells, wetlands, bodies of water, everything like that.
It was curious to me, the accusation that somehow you invited someone in to talk about an issue when, kind of implies that you have the power to keep someone out. And frankly, I think everybody should resent that kind of thinking, because no matter how extreme someone is or a group is, they get the same First Amendment rights as anyone to be a part of the process. So it kind of was odd, but I think one angle of that discussion when it came to Measure 5, I believe it was, on the 2012 ballot, as well as extraordinary places, is the issue of whether the Republican majority, both in the legislature and in the statewide level, when it comes to the Industrial Commission, in setting itself when it opposes some of these measures and opposes some of these bills by saying, you don't have to vote for this, we're going to do something later, and sets itself up to push a law later on without actually knowing what the plan is, and trying to cut the other guys off at the pass. And I wonder, do you have an opinion as to whether sometimes the approach in fighting these extremist concepts of saying you don't have to vote for that, we'll do something later, without knowing what that something is, do you think that puts you and other Republican officials and other state officials in a bad position?
Well, it certainly can, and I think that's where it really takes a lot of communication and working with all those that are involved. And that means if you have stakeholders that are impacted, they should get together and talk about it and meet with legislators, even if it's in the interim, because there may need to be some action that needs to be taken so we don't get in a horrible situation. Because just saying we'll deal with it later, maybe you got to have a pretty good idea of where stakeholders are at. We've heard that before. Just I'll give you one: Obamacare. Remember what Congress said, and some people in Congress said, just pass it and we'll figure it out later. Well, this kind of comes down to the same thing. Don't worry about it, we'll just pass it later. I applaud those that step up and try to be proactive, because those are the ones that are really impacted. And I think they gave a lot of thought. In many respects, we see it in water policy, and some of the attacks that are going on against agriculture concerning Clean Water Act, because it's easy to point a finger at agriculture because it's a non-point source and say you're the problem, when in reality we start drilling down and looking at some of the science, looking at some of the watersheds, and we find out in some cases agriculture is not even a part of that. So agriculture has been coming together to talk about these issues and say, hey, wait a minute, we are part of this, and we're ones that use the water, we're ones next to the water. We can look at best management practices. We can look at things that we need to do because we are responsive and we are responsible, and I'll give that to agriculture. You want to talk about a resilient group of people, noble, salt of the earth. They just don't like when they're being attacked unfairly or accused of things that there's no scientific basis for. But they will step up and respond, and they'll be responsible. And I give it to North Dakota agriculture producers and our rural citizens. They've done that time and time again, and it's just great working for them and serving them.
Getting back to the race for the nomination at the convention this weekend, on the issue of the Farm Bureau's involvement, is there any comment that you would like to make on how they've handled themselves and their involvement in this whole process?
Well, I think it's a bit unfortunate. Oh, no, it is unfortunate that it's become personal. It started out a long time ago, and on a few different areas. Probably the biggest one is just on policy. I've supported the Farm Bill. They did not. They came in my office when their measure was up a couple years ago and said, how come you're not supporting us? We gave you money. And I said, well, I have supported you. I don't know what you're referring to. Well, on our measure. And I said, well, I can neither oppose or support a constitutional measure as a constitutional office holder, or no government entity can. If the media, journalists ask me a question about clarification or an opinion about how I think that may work, that's different. But I can neither support or oppose or use resources to do such a thing. And it took a little while, but it seemed to finally resonate, or I thought they understood it. But then it went on to issues such as, I said, the Farm Bill, then the animal cruelty thing, where they tried making some big issue out of that, which I'm still not clear on, and then this extraordinary places. And I think because policy doesn't carry well, they tried to find other avenues and ways of just making it an issue, and I'm getting spanked because of my policy positions. And, competition is a good thing. It helps you refine, it helps you become better. But I think under the circumstances that this has happened, it's been really skewed because of the innuendos, the untruths, and the misrepresentation, the way that this all happened. That is, I don't believe, ethical or proper, but, it's the United States of America, and people have the right to work and run in that arena. So that's where we're at. I stand on my record. We have a lot of accomplishments in this office. We've done a lot of things in the last 5 years, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of my staff. I'm very proud of the fact that I cover with my staff about 80 boards, commissions, task force, committees, councils. We run over 104 different programs in this department with 77 employees. Talk about workload, and you talk about how well we do it. Yeah, we do it well. We continue to advocate for agriculture, and we regulate in a very responsible manner and a balanced approach.
Well, and your statement about how the law prohibits elected officials and public officials from officially campaigning against measures, I can reinforce that because I was involved in strengthening the law in the 2011 legislative session to extend that prohibition to ballot measures as well as candidates, and it certainly was the intent to keep public state dollars and local government dollars away from promoting ballot measures both at the state level and the local level. With just a couple of minutes left here, Commissioner Goehring, one final question: if the worst case scenario in your perspective happens and the convention endorses your competition, Judy Estenson, do you intend to place your name on the June primary ballot?
I get asked that quite often, and I guess here's my thing. I am seeking the Republican endorsement, and I know the whole issue has been raised about Keith Bierke, Kent Jones, and Sarah Vogel from some 24 or 25 years ago. I am not going to split the vote. Now, if push comes to shove and let's say there was an upset at the convention because it's a small fraction, a small segment of the party, and they stack delegates, I'm going to consider very strongly about going to the primary, because in the primary you get all the Republicans, you get a cross section of the North Dakota, and it's all about name recognition, and that I have across the state of North Dakota, and most people aren't falling victim, or I should say a lot of people are not falling victim to this misrepresentation of my record or the work I've done.
Right, and as 2012 showed with Congressman Kramer going to the primary and ignoring what the Republican convention decides doesn't necessarily hurt a candidate. Thank you for joining us today, Commissioner Goehring, and we hope to speak with you in the future.
Thank you very much, Dustin. You have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
You too. Joining us next will be Steve Bakken, host of Energy Matters, for a quick wrap-up and analysis of the state agriculture race at the North Dakota Republican Convention. Stay with us. Joining us now to discuss the Ag Commissioner's race at this weekend's state convention is Steve Bakken, host of Energy Matters on Tuesdays on KFYR Radio from 3 to 5. Steve, what do you think the public needs to know about the Ag Commissioner's race and the real issues at play in this battle at the convention?
Well, I think the meat and potatoes behind it is the fact that the Ag Commissioner's race is more than just the Ag Commissioner's race. With what's going on in North Dakota right now, most people in the state of North Dakota don't realize the importance of the Ag Commissioner's seat. The Ag Commissioner, that position is for agriculture, but that is also one of 3 seats on the Industrial Commission. And with what's going on in North Dakota, balancing agriculture with the energy sector right now, that's what makes that seat incredibly important for North Dakotans.
What do you think of the accusations by the challenger, Judy Estenson, regarding Commissioner Goehring's propensity to regulate, I guess would be the best way to put it?
I don't know if I'd say regulate. It's more monitoring. When you take a look at what's going on, and she does not discern between agriculture and the energy sector as well. From the agriculture side, I'm a little remiss to try to find somebody over the last 50 years as an ag secretary who has done more for the position and for agriculture in North Dakota. That record stands on its own. The Juggling Act, where you're juggling chainsaws right now, is on the energy side, and that lies within the Industrial Commission. You'd be a little hard-pressed to find too many people that are saying that there's over-regulation when it comes to energy in North Dakota right now.
Yeah, and Judy Estenson really doesn't even touch on the energy issue at all, even though that's probably the bulk of what the Ag Commissioner does these days in his role on the Industrial Commission.
Well, as far as the Industrial Commission is, yes. Sadly, having spoken with the Commissioner, one of the biggest challenges to that seat is balancing out what's going on with agriculture in competition with energy. We're all on the same page to make sure that things move forward in a timely fashion here in North Dakota, but the difficulty lies in trying to get the grain trains in at the same time you're trying to get the oil trains and the frac sands and everything else. From a railroad perspective, from a transportation perspective, that's where the competition lies between the two. But we need to have everybody working together. And there's very few people in the state of North Dakota that have as important a job as the Agriculture Commissioner. And I think there's very few people in North Dakota that could do that job as well as Commissioner Goehring's done.
And on the political side of it, what do you think the ramifications to the Farm Bureau might be if they don't win this race in the convention now that they've put all their eggs in Judy Estenson's basket?
Well, the biggest egg I see them potentially laying is the goodwill and the credibility that they had built from their version of Measure 2 and what they could have done for North Dakota property owners on the property tax side. This little fight that they've picked, and I'm not sure why they've picked it, but this little fight that they've picked, I think, has destroyed a lot of that credibility and a lot of the goodwill that they were in the process of building with their version of Measure 2.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see how this pans out and what it means going forward. Farm Bureau certainly has been more aggressive in recent years in the legislature, and we'll see how that plays out for them if it goes the way they think it will go. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
You're welcome.